Hey guys, so thanks again for joining me for another video. Today I'm talking about this plant right here, and it is so strong just sitting here. I can smell it, and it reminds me of a recent trip me and my wife made to a local pizzeria, and they also served, believe it or not, grilled cheese with Tuscan cheeses on it, served with a tomato sauce and whole basil leaves in the tomato sauce. Unbelievable. But anyways, what I'm talking about today is propagating this plant so we can have many, many more. I can keep some of them in the greenhouse and I don't have to worry about them dying. It is a annual, unfortunately, and it will not come back if it gets down below a certain temperature. I think it's 32 it will survive to, so it's basically freezing. But I'm going to talk about three methods of propagation and the way that's the easiest, but there are three different methods I know of. But it is just an incredible, it's just incredible how great it smells. I love it. But anyways, follow me back in the greenhouse and we'll start the propagation methods. But first I want to show you an up close of this plant and some things to look for before you take a cutting, and also what to look for if you want to do it from seeds. Okay guys, this is an up close of the basil plant. And if you look closely, you can see where the flowers were. There are some seeds that have formed, maybe a few insect eggs as well. So I'm going to cut these off. I've cleaned my pruners with Listerine or its generic equivalent. And so we're going to take some of those, see if we can get some seeds out of them. And I'm going to take some larger cuttings for the propagation methods. And let me see if you can see this. Okay, I'm going to take some larger cuttings, just different places. I think I'm going to do maybe 3 today just to demonstrate, maybe 4, because we want to do some different soil types. And I'm sure we've gotten below some nodes, and that's the key to taking the cuttings, and I'll show you that once we get in the greenhouse. So there's our cuttings we're going to work with. We're going to have to remove a lot of leaves. With these leaves, you need to put them in a Ziploc bags and either put them in your freezer or use them when they're still fresh. They're absolutely incredible to smell. It's just something you have to experience to be up close. It's better than any cologne or perfume you've ever smelled. Okay guys, back in the greenhouse, I'm going to show you quickly an easy way to collect your basil seeds. I've got a small container here. I've got the collected flower stems we've cut off. And I'm going to put them in a small container and do a little shake with them so we can break the seeds free. So this is really probably smaller than I want. I probably want something this size of maybe a solo cup with a lid. It needs to have a lid. You're just going to hit them like that. I'm sorry if this is really loud. It's probably going to drive you crazy. I'll try to remember to edit this out in the editing portion. Okay, I see some seeds that have broken free, and I'll show those to you up close. Okay guys, I'm going to carefully try to show you this if it's in focus. I'm going to remove the stems we cut off. And it looks like we have a mixture, a couple of leaves in there, but that is your seeds. Hope that will focus. And so they're ready to go on to the next step. If you're buying seeds, I'm going to talk about that as well. But if you happen to have a basil plant, then you can collect your own seeds. Okay, so that's our seeds right there that we have, and only a few. I'm just doing this for a demonstration, but if you had a basil plant that had a lot of flowers on it, then you're going to be in luck because you can collect all the seeds you want. Now, last year I purchased a combination seed kit from Amazon, and I was really happy with the results. This year I only purchased, I think, 2, maybe 3 different seed packets, one of them being sweet basil. So I'll put the links to those in the description. But if you can collect your own seeds, you're going to want to do a maybe just a few hours soak just to make sure they're ready and viable and ready to go. If you're purchasing them through a seed packet, you may want to soak them up to 24 hours to do that process of getting the seed ready to put in the seed starting soil. You don't want to use just a general potting soil. You want to do seed starting soil. Okay, so I'm going to start the few seeds I have here in one of these germination cups with its own lid, and I've got a special seed starting mix. I'll put the link down there for you. It's made up of peat moss, or you can make your own. It's made up of peat moss, coconut coir, and vermiculite. I think my personal recipe is something like 1/3 of each. So I'm going to try to dip that in there without making a huge mess. And the ideal planting depth for these seeds is about 1/4 of an inch. I'm going to press down just a little bit. We don't want it too close. We want it kind of little ways down, and want just a slight firmness to it to allow it to grab the seeds to grab onto the soil, but they're going to be slightly under a little bit of soil. So I'm going to put just a little bit of, excuse me, I got to do the seeds first. Okay, I'm going to sprinkle those. I'm going to spread them out because I don't want them too close together and competing for nutrients. So I'm just going to spread them out, just kind of throughout the pot. There's only about 5 or 6 in here. So there we go. And we're going to dust this with about 1/4 of an inch of the potting mix and lightly press it in there. Okay, I don't have my water handy, but I'm going to use my misting bottle that I always use, that I always recommend, that I've had for 3 years, and I absolutely love it over the hand sprayers. The hand sprayers really make your hands wear out when you have a lot of work to do in the greenhouse. So that misting bottle takes the work out of it. But anyways, we're just going to imagine I've watered it. We're going to put the lid on it. If you're doing a lot of these, you may want to use a larger container. And the ideal temperature for the seed to germinate is between 70 and 80 degrees. If you're doing this in an unheated garage and it's the cooler time of the year, you want to make sure you use a heating mat. And so that will help keep your seeds up to the right temperature. You can start this in your house anytime during the winter and just have basil throughout the year. But you want to remember, if you're planning on taking it out in the yard, maybe late winter so it'll have time to start growing. But that's the thing, 70 to 80 degrees, and the humidity, just average humidity in a home. But the main thing is you want the soil to stay evenly moist, not saturated or waterlogged, but you don't want it to dry out. And just keep an eye on them about once every day or two, just to see what your seedlings are doing, and make sure they're not crowded too much into your pot. If you're wanting to do it in an open tray like this, that's just fine, but you'll want to put some saran wrap or some kind of clear covering on it. I think this grew what was it? It was some catnip for the cats we have, and it originally had a dome on it, and I'm not sure what happened to that. But if you're doing it in any kind of plastic container, just put some saran wrap on it so you can keep the humidity up. Now, if you want to use a tray like this and you're doing a lot of different types of seeds, again, you have the dome and you can adjust the humidity, but I would just keep it closed so you can keep maximum humidity on the seeds. You can either use this cell tray or not use it. You can just put your potting mix or your seed mix directly into the tray. And so either way, but remember, 70 to 80 degrees. So if it's a cool time of year and you're doing this in your basement or garage, you'll want to have the heat mat. But if you're just doing it in your upstairs part of your house, that's fine. You won't even probably need the heat mat unless you keep your house really cold. But one thing to remember is to keep humidity high. You don't want them to dry out. Usually most AC systems are going to dry out the air, so you may want to misspray it just once every day or so. So now on to propagating from stem cuttings. And the ideal stem cutting is going to be something like this, 4 to 6 inches. These have done extremely well this year. Incredible smell too. So this is sweet basil, but all basils can be done the same way on a stem cutting. I believe I know of like 12 different types, but I don't know how many total types there is. There could be many more than that. But anyways, this is what we're going to work with. We're going to cut the remainder of the stem off right below the leaf nodes right there, and then we're going to remove a majority of the leaves. We're going to use some sterilized pruners. These are my standard garden pruners, but these are much better to work with because you can cut big, very exacting. You don't have to just yank the leaves off, and you can do that very quickly. Also, all your cutting tools before you take the cuttings and while you're working, you don't want to go from one plant to the other, one type of plant to the other. So if you're working on one plant, you don't have to do this. But in between different types of plants, take some Listerine or its generic equivalent and just spray your cutters down, wipe them off, and that way your tool is now sterilized. Now, I may have mentioned this outside and I can't remember, but I want to reiterate it just in case I didn't say it. You want to, for stem propagation, you don't want the stems that are flowering. You just want one, as this one is, no flowers growing on it. You want it to concentrate all its effort into growing roots. So right below the first set of leaf nodes right there, I'm going to remove at a 90-degree angle to maximize the surface area. And these probably could use a little bit of a sharpening. I'm going to go up the stem and remove. I'm not going to pull it off. I'm just going to carefully cut it with these cutters because they're so precise in cutting. And as you're working here, don't throw these away. You can take them inside, put them in a Ziploc bag and put them in the freezer, or use them fresh, either way. But I'm just going to go up and I'm going to remove all of the leaves almost to the top, because we want it to focus its energy on producing roots while it's in the potting medium. Now we're going to do half. We're going to do the soil method, and we're also going to do the water method. And either way is fine. Some people say one or the other is easier. So there we are. We've got it ready to go. I'm going to take one more leaf off because I don't want it to minimize energy. I'm going to cut the top two in half because I just want the leaves to be as small as possible so it can put all that energy into producing roots right there at the base. So that's the first one. We've got a few more we're going to do, and we'll move on to the next one. Okay, so we have our 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 stem cuttings that we're going to do, and I'm going to do 3 in soil and 2 in water because I have one here I'm going to demonstrate that I recently done in water and show you what happens so quickly. I've got a standard potting mix that I make myself. I made this in a separate video. I'll put the link up at the top so you can see how to make your own potting mix. It'll save you a lot of money. And another thing that you can add to your potting mix, I don't do this every time, but sometimes I do, is these water crystals. They'll expand up to 400% their own size, and they will help if you don't water every day. This will help stay moist. These are really great at keeping your plants alive. And sometimes I use it even in the ground when I'm planting a tree. I think I demonstrated that on a persimmon. So anyways, we're going to move on to putting these in their containers. And so that's our seeds. I almost put that in the wrong one. Okay, now that is our seed. So I'm going to put that off to the side because it still needs to be watered. Also, I'm going to put it in a tray. These have holes in the bottom so they can wick some water up into them. I'm going to spray them from above as well, but a very light mist spray with our Solo sprayer that I always highly recommend. Okay, so I'm going to put 3 in soil, and I'm using our proprietary blend that we make ourselves, and it is really easy to do. Okay, so we're going to take out some soil. Try not to make a giant mess, I'm sorry about that, as I always do. And I'm just going to put some of the potting soil in each one. Okay, and I'm going to tamp it down just a little bit so the stem cutting will have something to hold on to. So we have those 3, and we're going to do those first. But the first thing is we need to put it into our rooting hormone. It's not absolutely necessary. They probably would root even without it, but I just want to give them that extra boost, that extra chance to succeed. So we're going to dip that in there. We're going to right below the leaf node, swish it around there. And I don't have my chopstick handy, so I'll have to use something else to pull back the soil so we don't knock our soil off of our potting, excuse me, not potting mix, our if I can get this out, our hormone 3, if we can do that without knocking off, we can make a little bit of a hole there. And we've got that one ready. So we're going to go on to the next one, and I want to take a little bit off. I think this may be a little bit longer than I want, as is the first one. Put that into our rooting hormone, and put that into the soil. To demonstrate these. These are great for keeping humidity in. Okay, we've got our first stem cutting in place. And one thing I will say about this particular brand, they don't stay on as well as I want them to. And I'm searching for a different brand, but this is a way to keep them on there with painter's tape. You want to make sure, in case you have a pet inside, that you don't want them getting into your potting mix. You can just take some painter's tape and wrap it halfway around, and that'll hold it securely in place. Just make sure it's touching the top in the container. And if you want to maximize your humidity, you can just take a small piece of the painter's tape. There's little holes in the top of this to allow some of the humidity to escape. But if you want to maximize humidity until it takes root, you can do that. The great thing about these is they're clear, so you can see if any roots develop. But that is the method to doing the stem cuttings in potting soil. We're going to finish up with the next one. I think that's the one we were going to do. Do the same thing in the rooting hormone. Put it into our container and find the proper lid for it. Okay, and I'll finish the last one off camera, and then we'll move on to the, no, I'm sorry, that is 3. Okay, here is the one in water. I haven't put the lid on it. I may have to go back and cut this one because I think that one may be a little bit too tall. Nope, it actually fits perfectly. Okay, so there we have it. I don't know if you can see those. I'm just going to move them back a little bit. That's the 3 we have in soil. I'm going to move on to water propagation. And what I want to show you, I'm going to give you a close-up of this one that I just started a couple of days ago. There's roots already forming and it's still doing good. I didn't remove a lot of the leaves. I wanted to use some of them inside, but I'll show you how that's working. Okay guys, so I'm going to show you, I think I'm in focus here. I'm trying not to get it too close to the camera. So I recently just started this one and you can see roots are, that's out of focus there. There we go, a little bit better. Give it a second. But anyways, that is roots already forming there. You can see it right there, and it's only been in here for a few days. I didn't remove as many leaves as I wanted to. I just wanted to use this as during some cooking inside, but that is a perfect example of how quickly they will start to root in water. This particular one, I wasn't planning on transferring this to a pot with soil at any time. I was just going to use this one, let it grow in this water, and then eventually just use up all the leaves on it. Now, I will show you what to do to propagate in water, and we'll move on to that now. Okay guys, we've got our traditional glass top. If you were wanting to transfer this at some point, you're going to want a hole in your top a lot bigger than this. You're going to want to punch a much larger hole, but be very careful with these metal lids because on the underside you're going to have very sharp edges, so it can really cut you quickly. But you could use a drill bit to open this up to maybe 1/2 inch, but as you watch the roots, you got to be careful because you pull it out, you're going to rip a lot of roots off because that is a sharp edge. Another way to do it is just in plastic cups. You can take your cutting, and we've got some tape, painter's tape. We can just drape across the edge so we can kind of use that as something to rest on and kind of put it into place, lock it into place on the edge of the container. So that way it doesn't want to slide down to the bottom. And so that will help. You can also punch a hole in the painter's tape and just goes directly in. So that way you can just tear the painter's tape and you can remove it a lot easier back out of the container. Now, as far as the rooting in water, you're going to want to change the water every 2 to 3 days. And I think it's a good idea to add 1/2 teaspoon of hydrogen peroxide to it. That's going to help the root formation. The way I would do it to prove it to yourself is to do 2 with just regular filtered, or I don't know if I'd use bottled water, but I'd say filtered water in 2 containers, and then do 2 containers with a 1/2 teaspoon of hydrogen peroxide. And you can prove it to yourself as to how much better the roots form with the hydrogen peroxide. So that's water, starting them in water. You can do that. Really, they root so easy. I'm not even going to put any of the rooting hormone on them. I'm just going to put them directly in the water. So that's soil, seed, and water. So that is the 3. And I'll tell you a few other ideas I have about basil. Now, some people say that the basil will perform well in indirect sunlight rather than direct sunlight. My basil, this sweet basil, is in full sunlight. It's 6 to 8 hours a day minimum during the summer, and it does extremely well. And the reason is the basil I have is on an micro irrigation system. So right at the base of the plant, it gets water every day. In the heat of the summer, it gets water 2 to 3 times a day, about 1 minute. So it's constantly moist but not soggy. And that's another thing you want to do. You don't want the soil that it's sitting in to be soggy because it will start to have all sorts of problems with disease and it just will not perform. So you want the soil moist, well draining, but not soggy. Now, one thing I will say about these young plants is they do better if you put them in indirect sunlight to begin until they become established outdoors, especially if you have had it inside for a while. So these, you don't want them in direct sunlight. You want them to slowly acclimate themselves once they have a nice root system. And if you're going to water every day or every other day at minimum to keep them really happy, I'd say then you can put them in direct sunlight. But if you don't have a regular watering regimen, then I would say, yeah, maybe partial sunlight or maybe a little bit less direct sunlight would be better. So either way, you'll know what your own system is set up is and what you're capable of doing. But yeah, mine grow great in full sunlight, but it's an established plant by the time it went into the garden. And about fertilizer, what we want to talk about is fertilizing. You don't want to fertilize when it's too young because it can cause it to be too leggy and tall and kind of fall over. So, but once it becomes established, once that happens, use Osmocote slow release fertilizer. I like this. There's an indoor and outdoor version, and I believe there's another version. I rarely buy it, but there's 2 different versions of this. I'll put links to both of them in the down below. But anyways, yeah, slow release, and then you just don't want to over fertilize. Make sure, especially when they're young. So once they're established, it's okay to put in some slow release fertilizer. Okay, so some troubleshooting issues you're going to encounter if you've over fertilized. Like I said, that can cause leggy growth and cause it to fall over. If there's insufficient light, that can happen as well. You could, if you're doing this indoors, you could put it near a non-south facing window where it's going to get some intermittent sunlight through the day, or you could supplement with some grow lights that can help as well. But that could be a reason you're having leggy growth, kind of tall, stringy growth, if I could say that right. Leggy growth is what I'm trying to say. Another thing that can affect basil is diseases, or specifically fungal diseases. And one thing you'll want to do is try not to overwater. And if you've got a lot of diseases happening, you might try to water at the base of the plant and not just do an overspray. So if you're misting, you might mist it right at the base if you're seeing these problems pop up. Another thing, once your plant makes it outside, you may start having a problem with insects. Aphids and whiteflies are very common on basil. I've got a video about a natural insecticide that I like to use, which involves neem oil. I'll put the link to that as well, so you can take a look at that if you want to use an organic, safe pest control answer. So that's another thing you look for. Once they go outside, you may see that. Just kind of take a look, and if you see anything on your leaves, then consider a natural alternative first. That's what I would do. And then if that doesn't work, maybe you can move up to insecticidal soap. I've had and I have a huge insect problem. I've had very few problems with insect on these. They just do so well if they're not struggling to survive. If they're underwatered and have a lot of issues, then that's when pests can come in and attack. But these plants that I have, they just get just the right amount of water and they do extremely well. Basil is an easy plant to grow. Now, as far as troubleshooting, I think I've covered some of the basics. There could be some other problems that pop up, but I don't think so. I think I've gotten most of them. But there are many, many different types of basil and many different types of taste in that basil. Amazingly, basil has some medicinal qualities, and I'll shoot through those real quick at the end of the video. And after doing some research, I found things about basil that I didn't even know. That was quite amazing when it comes to basil. But as far as the taste, you just can't beat it in a tomato-based sauce. And I mentioned at the beginning of the video of dipping a Tuscan grilled cheese sandwich, which is kind of weird for a pizzeria, but it is so good when you eat that. That goes perfectly together. It's the homemade bread at this place. They have the homemade tomato sauce and the whole basil leaves in it. It's just incredible. I wish I could give you the recipe. I don't have it off the top of my head, or I don't actually have it at all. I have to go there to get it. So I'm going to do a quick rundown of everything that we've covered, just to reiterate everything. So in case I've left something out, I'll include it in this part. You want to start with quality seeds. You want to take a cutting. If you're taking cuttings, you want to make sure it's not diseased or there's any issues with it. So let me keep on with the list. We want 6 to 8 hours once the plant becomes established. Make sure that it has that in sunlight 6 to 8 hours a day. You want to keep the soil consistently moist but not waterlogged. So you want to make sure your soil is well draining. Make sure that when you plant your seeds, they're about 1/4 of an inch deep, and you want those to be out of direct sunlight. Okay, you want to space your established plants about 12 to 18 inches apart so they have room to grow. Maybe I'm leaning a little bit more towards the 18 inches because these do get the size of a small shrub. You want to make sure that the chance of frost has passed in the spring, or that you give it plenty of time. If you're planning on bringing it inside and you're going to start it late in the summer or early fall, you want to make sure you're away from the chance of frost at least 6 to 8 weeks. So you'll have time for the plant to establish itself, and then you can bring it inside. And it's a good idea to pinch off additional branches from time to time so it doesn't become overly too much basil. You want to just keep encouraging that growth. Also, if you see a lot of flowers forming, you'll want to pinch those off as well, because you don't want it to go into that bolting state. You want to encourage maximum leaf production, unless you're wanting a lot of seeds. But when you start seeing flowers forming, take those off. And from year to year, you'll want to rotate your crops. Put something else in the place that you had the basil planted. If you're letting it die in the garden, put something else there and move your basil to a new location. And 2 plants that are great as companion plants to basil is tomatoes and peppers. So that's great to interplant those there. And I've read somewhere that basil can actually repel mosquitoes. So if you have those planted together, when you're outside working with your tomatoes or peppers, that basil could act as kind of a natural repellent in that one little area. And you can plant basil in pots as long as the pot's large enough, because like I say, these will get the ones I'm growing, getting about 2 to 3 feet tall, and the root system are probably getting fairly large into there. So a good sized pot, maybe a 3 to 5 gallon sized pot. One great thing to do is to mulch with the finely shredded pine bark. I've showed that several times, that it's called soil conditioner at Lowe's, and that will help retain moisture in the soil and also prevent a lot of weeds from popping up around your basil. So if you have it in planted in an open area in your garden and there's a lot of weed issues, just about a 1 to 2 inch layer of that very finely shredded pine mulch, and that actually might add a little bit of nutrition to the soil as well. If you have a pH tester, you want the pH to be between 6.5 and 7.5. And you can pick those up just about everywhere. I'll put a link to Amazon in the description as well on those. Now, about storing basil, once you bring it inside, you can put it in a Ziploc bag. It doesn't really like the refrigerator. It's going to wilt pretty quickly, but if you want to freeze it, that's great. That's even better. But also you can dehydrate it. If you have a food dehydrator, which I'm planning to buy pretty soon, I would go that route as well, using a food dehydrator. And you could store it just on the countertop or in a cabinet, and it'll last forever. So basil is packed with antioxidants and other nutrients, vitamin K being one of them. And I don't really know a lot about vitamin K, but I do know that it is extremely important, especially if you have a pet that's ate some type of poison. They'll often give your rodenticide or something like that your cat or dog has eaten. We took our dog for this specific problem once, that he had ate some rodenticide, and they gave him vitamin K, which is an anti-clotting vitamin that will stop your pet from dying from rodenticide. So basil also has some anti-inflammatory properties, and so that's the complete opposite of what everyone eats in America, which is sugar. So I would avoid the sugar and eat the basil as much as possible if you have inflammatory issues in your body. And I guess I'll finish up with one of the most interesting things I read about basil, that it can be a mood enhancer as far as dopamine in the brain and some other chemicals that are going on in there. But that's an amazing thing, that basil has that property, and I'm not sure how much basil you can eat. You have to mix it, of course, with something because it has a kind of strong taste, but it's a great thing all the way around. So if you like basil, I would definitely try to propagate it through the methods we have previously shown. I just love it. I can't get enough basil. I think basil, aside from tomatoes, is my favorite thing to grow in the garden. So as you can see, there's a lot to learn about basil. It's an amazing herb, and I absolutely love it. I'm just thinking about that grilled cheese sandwich even as we speak. But anyways, I just wanted to say I probably went on longer than I needed to, but I hope you've picked up something about propagating basil through those three methods, whether either seed or stem propagation in water or stem propagation in soil. It's really easy. You can do it. It's not hard at all. So I just want to say thanks for watching. I really appreciate every subscriber and every comment. I try to respond to every comment as I can. So just thank you so much. So I hope you guys are having a great day, and you'll come back and watch another video.